Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Wildlife Community Podcast, a podcast that's made for wildlife-friendly gardeners and rewilders. This week we're joined by ornithologist, that's a bird expert to me, but maybe not you, TV presenter and author Dan Rouse, whose passion is the birds of the South Wales coast. But more recently she's been writing about how to attract birds to our own gardens, as well as putting up 1 or 2 owl boxes. Hello Dan.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's nice to be outside.
It is lovely, isn't it? The sun is shining. Thank you for coming to Wildlife World HQ here in the Cotswolds to talk all things birding. But let's start where you began, in South Wales, where you still live, don't you?
Yeah, still live in the same house.
Whenever I see you getting excited on Twitter or even Countryfile nowadays, you're on the Gower and you're looking at wildfowl through your binoculars. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's what I spend most of my life and have spent most of my life doing, to be fair. The more I think about it, you're like, I don't really leave that, do I? I'm still there.
It probably is a silly question, but what brings you to the Gower? What takes you down to the beach to look at birds?
Growing up with my dad and my brother, it was somewhere that I could look at the wildlife and my brother could go and play, so that it was a mixture of keeping both the kids happy. Because obviously, as one person trying to control 2 very enthusiastic outdoor kids, it can be a bit tough. So my dad had a right job of it. Gower's my home. It's where I love that you can walk between every single beach. So if we're having a long day out, we'll pack our lunches, take the scope, take the binoculars, and we'll head round and just completely bird the whole area. So it's lovely. It aches your legs, but it's brilliant.
What do you tend to see?
Gower's mainly a lot of sea life, so we have porpoises, dolphins offshore. This week there's been leatherback turtles offshore.
Wow.
So a lot of my week has been squinting at the sea, trying to see a little head popping up, so it's not been successful yet.
Oh.
But yeah, we get loads of common scoter in the winter, so every month there's a changeover in wildlife, from pollinators to butterflies, and then we get our lizards, adders and stuff start coming out. So every month, every walk that you do, whether it's the same one or different, there's different wildlife. So it's something that's really interesting, that it can never get boring.
Oh, it sounds gorgeous.
Yes.
What about the birds? What about birding? What made you kind of niche towards that area?
Growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. A lot of our activities were garden based, or we used to go to the park or to the beach or go for walks and stuff. Growing up with my dad, he was very creative, so I got into the mindset of I can build anything. So at the age of 5, my dad taught me how to build my first nest box to go on the wall. That actually died this year.
Oh, gosh, that's lasted.
Yeah, I've been painting it and repairing it for years, but I've finally given up with it now. There's nothing left of the old box. But growing up, it was always, we're building nest boxes, and then when I was 10, we built our own bird bath. The leftover cement that my dad used to build the shed, I poured that cement into tyres and moulded my own bird bath. So yeah, growing up, it was always, you can do anything and you can build anything. Birding wise, it was providing homes for the nature in my garden, and then going outside, constantly seeing birds. For now, like, I'll sit here and you're like, oh, I can hear goldcrest, or I can hear blue tits, and there's swallows. Birds follow you anywhere you go. So it's quite nice getting into them, that you realise how much you can hear as well as what you can see as well.
What are the typical birds of the South Wales coast? What would you normally see on a day down at the beach?
We have a lot of things like skylark are everywhere, and you can't miss them, especially when they do their little parachute. You can really spot them. We're quite fortunate to have chough as well, so that's always a delight for anyone visiting. That Gower, Pembrokeshire always have chough. And we have lots of seabirds, and my favourite, which are the geese. So in the winter we get dark-bellied Brent geese, and then the massive amount of shelducks as well. There's lots of big flocks of things, which is always lovely.
Over the last year, I suppose almost last 2 years now, have you noticed things change at all down in the Gower?
Yeah, the amount of people has been surprising. Like, we always get summer holidays, you have to walk to the Gower. You can't get a bus or you can't drive because it's completely chock-a-block. But I've noticed it even in May in the week, it's so busy with people just walking, and people were stopping, which is always really different, where normally you have people walk past different things, but they're stopping, looking at bees, walking through sunflowers and stuff, which is always really interesting and really different.
Has that impact had an effect at all on birding and bird life in South Wales?
Not so much in terms of counts. The counts are fairly typical of what we normally see, but we are seeing more. There's so many like barbecues left on the beach. It's not directly impacting the birds, but things like nesting birds, there's so many people now walking through the dunes rather than sticking to the paths. We also have people leaving masks and things like that, so we're having to do like beach cleans almost every week or every other week just to pick stuff up, because birds they're very intelligent, but they're not very wise in terms of human interactions and human activities. So we're getting loads of masks caught around birds' throats, masks caught around birds. We're having dolphin strandings, stuff like that, where it's not directly related to humans. It's just there's certain things that people are doing where they're not quite picking up after themselves. So we have a lovely, lovely team who go out beach cleaning, stuff like that. So we are doing it, but you just wish that if people just did it anyway.
Yes,
then,
you wouldn't have to.
Yeah, and birds can have an easier time of things where they're nesting, they're not constantly getting disturbed. It's the reason why paths are there, not to sound very like follow the rules, but when there's paths, there's a reason why they're there, especially if things like tiny birds like reed warblers or chiffchaffs, they nest in the smallest of places. We have redshank that will just find a clump of grass and will just lay an egg in that. Like, no mess with, I'm going to find a nice spot. It's like grass, there we are, that'll do. Ducks as well. If you leave anything unattended, you will find a mallard nest underneath it. We left the wheelbarrow just on its side as I was draining out water from it, and it's just mallards straight underneath. Like, I'll have that. So
wow.
I haven't got my wheelbarrow back yet.
What about your own garden? What's that like for attracting bird life?
It's been really, really good. So we've had interesting things like rose-coloured starling. We've also had things like yellow-browed warbler, which are pretty unusual. So to have them in the garden has been great. But then we're seeing large numbers of things now returning, like goldfinches, chaffinches. We haven't had them in large numbers for years. And we've got nuthatches back, which are lovely. We have our rowdy wood pigeons that every month the poor girl gets chased around the garden, so they're constantly causing havoc and knocking any bird feeder off, so everything's now bolted down. But things like starlings, the amount of starlings I used to see when I was younger, they used to be a nuisance because we used to have so many of them. Now we only get like groups of maybe 15 or 20, so you can see firsthand the decline of starlings and house sparrows. But it's quite sad every time you look from the upstairs window, the amount of concrete creeping into everyone's gardens around us. You look out and you see our lovely trees, our shrubs, our hedges, and then there's no grass next to us, no grass the house down. They're all just patioed gardens, and you sort of think, this is what we're coming to now.
That's not going to help.
No. Slabs and plastic is the new norm for gardens, I think.
Is that, I suppose, your number one tip? You've written a fantastic book called How to Attract Birds to Your Garden, but is that the number one, I suppose, trend that you're seeing that means that you're needing to write a book like that?
Yeah, a lot of it is people assume if you want a nice garden, you know, like these entertaining gardens where you have a patio, you have like your little outdoor setting, benches, whatever you have, that if you have a nice garden, you can't have a wildlife garden. But there's nothing stopping you if you want to slab your garden down and just have concrete outside. You've still got spaces for bird feeders, you can still put pots in, so you haven't got to choose one or the other. You can still have a very pretty entertaining garden but have little pots of like wildlife plants, and also having things like bird feeders on your wall, even just putting in like an apple tree. It's a food source for birds that also grows nice and pretty in the summer. In the winter you get apples as well, so it's a nice compromise that you can have a bit of both in every garden as well.
You did say when I first asked you about your garden that certain species have been coming back and you've seen in bigger numbers. What is that, the work that you've done, or is something else going on there?
We're noticing it more with lockdown. Since 2019, end of 2019, the park opposite us has just been, there's events every weekend. There's also so many kids now using it, which is brilliant for getting kids outdoors and that kind of thing. But there's so much being done there that the birds don't have anywhere to roost and they don't have anywhere to feed because everything's getting tidied up all the time. So normally you'd have things like pine cones, some of the conkers and stuff end up on the floor. You also get seeds coming off trees that we're seeing them swept up constantly to keep it looking tidy for events, that the birds haven't got anywhere to feed in the park.
Interesting.
So now that we're putting out bird feed in our garden more, and we're putting out a variety of different feeders, then we're seeing more and more birds using them. So like chaffinches don't typically like gardens, they're like very large open spaces. But they've started using our garden instead of using the park, same as goldfinches. We're getting more collared doves, nuthatches and stuff. So it's seeing the change. It just shows how important gardens are for wildlife, that even somewhere designated as a wildlife friendly and outdoorsy place like a park can still be bad for wildlife, but then the little changes you're making in your garden makes a huge difference, that they have an alternative. They're not just going to disappear.
What's a typical day or morning for you to kind of get your garden ready to attract birds?
Oh, it's a lot of work.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. I tend to do things, this is my OCD talking, I have to do things clockwise, otherwise I miss things out. So normally it's just going around with a little bucket of soap and water, any drop-ins or anything on bird feeders, clean them off straight away, because obviously there's a lot of diseases going around with goldfinches, chaffinches, greenfinches, that they're all bacteria related. Even though I take the feeders down every Sunday, every day I'll just go around and any drop-ins, just scrub them off, scrub all the perches just to stop any spreading of diseases. I then top up the feeders, seeing what birds are liking more. So certain times of year birds have different things. So now that there's a lot of fledglings around, I'll put out extra mealworms and extra peanuts, which are good sources of protein. A lot of the time it's clearing up all the seed that's ended up on the floor. It's fine there, I don't mind it at all, but sometimes the barley grows really thick. So any large clumps of barley that have maybe gotten a bit mouldy on the floor, I'll clean them up. I then top up all the bird baths and clear out, because they're underneath trees, clear out any leaves. So it's a lot of work. I know, who needs a gym when you have to
Well, there you go, yeah.
fill up feeders every day?
In our garden, we get a lot of sparrows, tits, great tits, the occasional dunnock, and some blackbirds actually. But we have really noticed this summer they've been really hungry. They've been flocking to our feeders. Do you feed all year as well?
Yeah, so I change my feed depending on the season. Winter time, I'll put out very fatty things, so add in raisins into mixes where they're not necessarily the most full of nutrient food, but for birds they're full of fat. So winter time, when they need an extra bit of muscle or extra bit of fluff to keep them warm, I'll put out raisins. We'll also put out oats and put out apple peel as well. And then springtime, extra protein and chopping them up small, so that if the parents need to feed on the nest, they've got the smaller things to take out. Things like dried mealworms, just to cut them in half, because it's easier for little ones to swallow than a full mealworm. And then summertime, yeah, lots of protein, lots of peanuts, putting out fat cakes as well, especially ones with peanuts or mealworms into them. It's a good way to encourage the birds to start looking for protein and looking for things that way. Yeah.
So it's all about looking at the wildlife, but also thinking about the seasons and what they need at specific times of the year.
You sort of get into a rhythm of it. It's like when you make food for yourself. If you're a bit extra hungry, you might add some more carbs to fill yourself up. With birds, it's the same thing. So if they need extra fat before migration, like this time of year, extra protein. In the winter, they need extra fat, so putting out extra fat balls, extra suet cakes, raisins into trail mixes, that kind of thing.
Your book actually shows how to make quite a lot of these things for your garden, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I wanted the book to be as inside of my brain as possible. So everything I do, I've tried to make it as simple as possible. Of, you haven't got to overthink things. Like, this is really good for this type of feeder, and going into depths, because sometimes you walk into a shop and you see a whole wall full of feeders and you just think, I haven't got a clue what these are for. So I've tried to match up what food goes with what feeder so you don't get clumps stuck in the bottom, and also what ones are good for each bird as well. So if you're trying to attract more like goldfinches, they're not very agile, so you need to have ones with very large perches to go on. So it's that type of thing where it's an easy way to adapt for certain species. You can do it that way. If it's just that you want to adapt for seasons and to benefit the wildlife that you already have, there's things like that in there as well.
What was that?
I think there's a blackbird coming out. I'm getting distracting bird in now.
Well, let's move on to bigger birds, and more specifically owls. You've got a company called Tadorna Tours, and you've started a project called Cymru Naturiol, a rewilding project, do we call it?
Yeah, so what we do through all of our tours is the money that we make off them we put back into conservation work. So things like the owl boxes, we currently have 25 of them up around the Gower everywhere. So we're working with local farmers, that farmers have got them on their land, so that tawny owls are benefiting off different farmers because of the size of their fields. It's a great hunting ground for tawny owls and barn owls as well. So we have some barn owl boxes up with some local farmers, and next year we're going to look at putting some kestrel boxes up on posts as well. We're trying to encourage farmers to work with us so that we're using their land. They go around and do the regular work that they always do, because farmers know what they're doing when it comes to fields. So we encourage them to leave the hedges, doesn't matter if they grow over, and we'll go around, we'll have a look on their land, let them know what they've got on their land as well, and then we're putting up boxes for them so that they're benefiting the wildlife and the wildlife is benefiting from them, but they can still go around their day-to-day business, so that we're not asking farmers to change or stop doing this, stop doing that. We're just saying carry on as normal, but can we pop up a box, which has worked because we have tawny owls in our boxes, which are lovely, and we've got some stock doves as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Why owls? Is this just your Harry Potter
Yeah.
fandom?
Sort of. I've always loved owls, but the main thing with things like tawny owls is the lack of space there is for them. Tawny owls is one of our most common birds of prey that we have, but they're slowly declining. So it's the same thing as sort of house sparrows, where they have that very gradual decline because it's down to habitat loss. So what we're trying to do is anything that's relatively suitable for an owl, we're putting up a box, trying to get the owls to think about this is a safe zone, this is a nice easy area to breed in. Because they rely on like dense woodlands, we haven't got a lot of those left for the amount of owls that we have. So we're trying to spread them around a little bit, and it's working. We've got maybe 2 or 3 pairs in different woodlands, and we've also got some sharing woodlands, but because there's 2 or 3 nest boxes in the woodland, they're not competing with each other for food or for a nesting spot, because they have that safe space. So yeah, it's trying to make sure everyone gets along, everyone stays nice, and that the numbers keep on improving, so we're not seeing that huge gradual decline. Same as kestrels, we're seeing that with kestrels, that the numbers of them is just dropping gradually, but things start dropping gradually and then they start speeding up once we get to the point of there's too many for what we have. So kestrels are naturally cliff nesters, but they take the boxes so easily. So any fields you can put up maybe a 4 or 5 meter post and put a box on top, and kestrels will just take to it.
Really?
They're not fussy animals at all.
Oh, gosh. What's the future, the bigger picture for the project as a whole? What's this sort of working towards?
Ideally, what we want to be is that people can come to us almost like a consultancy, where they can just come to us and say, I've got a field, what can I do? And we can give them an idea of this is what boxes you can put up, this is really good habitat for hedgehogs, let's put in some hedgehog boxes, leave this area. Or we've got some farmers now that want to leave part of it for wildlife, but they don't know what to plant. So we're just giving them a list of these are companies that supply this type of thing, and these are some nice mixes you can put in. So almost as a free advice service, because we don't charge at all, because it's supposed to be benefiting wildlife. So yeah, when they just come to us and say, I've got a barn, can I put up a barn owl box? It's, yeah, perfect. We'll come and help you put it up. We'll monitor it for you, and then we'll just let them know what they have. Even if you have small scale land and you don't know what to do, we're always recommending products as well. So if you have a question of, I want to attract these and I'm not really sure how, we have a list of products from Wildlife World that we just say, these are perfect for this. Just go buy them, pop them up and let us know how they go.
Excellent.
And then any questions, and then we'll continue working with people throughout as well, and hopefully start building it so we have a nice network of gardens, businesses, even like in city centres. They have little spaces that they have. Why not just put up some bird feeders? They're nice to look at, not a lot of work. Anything you don't eat, most people have oatmeal or something for breakfast, that even like some cereals, you can just put them on the feeder. So it's not a lot of, I have to keep buying bird food, I have to keep doing this. Raisins, oats, bran flakes, anything like that, birds will eat it on the feeders.
Excellent. Just clear out the kitchen cupboards.
Yeah, that's what I do.
And I saw a fascinating tweet from you a couple of days ago about the benefits of putting up nest boxes when it comes to pest control as well.
I get so many questions about, I've got snails in my gardens, how can I naturally get rid of them? Slug pellets are one of my banes of life, because everyone puts down slug pellets, but there's so many birds that keep picking them up and eating them. They just look like suet pellets. Using copper tape, you can use lemon juice, you can also use things like eggshells. They work really well with herbs as well, so if you put crushed eggshells around herbs, the slugs can't manoeuvre across them. Natural ways to benefit your garden and what you do, because it's not that you can't garden like allotments and stuff. You want to help nature. They can be there, just not on the lettuce. It's things like caterpillars as well. It's just a case of, I have sacrificial ones, so I have some sacrificial strawberries that go on the end for the wood lice and for the birds and things, and then I have my ones which are penned in with eggshells, copper tape, so they're mine. And then the others can use them. There's so many people who want to benefit wildlife but not really sure how to do things with pests. But nest boxes, it's putting them up at certain places where cats can't get to them. If you're having problems with cats, then you can put your nest boxes in trees where they can't get to them. If you don't have trees, then putting them on your house as well, because the cats can't obviously get to them that way. You can still do things, you just have to go a different route to figure things out.
And on a bigger scale, how can that help farmers?
You've got things like natural mixes that you can put out, because a lot of it is heavy pesticides that is just sprayed everywhere, where it's a little bit more work, but you can put things, instead of doing stuff on a large scale and just spraying everything, to do targeted spraying. So if you do really need to use pesticides, to then leave a certain area without it for our pollinators to use, and then to use targeted spraying where you're just aiming for the roots instead of spraying the whole plant. Because if you try and explain to a bee, this one's not for you, but that one's for you, it's not going to work. So if you use pesticides on the base of the plant rather than the flowers, there's still a feeding area for pollinators as well. But yeah, it's a lot of work.
How do you hope that the nest boxes will help the farmers?
So ideally it's just to get people thinking about wildlife. So not so much thinking like I have to start at 100 and do everything. It's a nice introduction. Like, you tend to get hooked on things. Most people who have gotten into wildlife have either watched it on TV or have read books or something like that. There's been a moment that you sort of think, yeah, I want to do more for wildlife. So things like with the nest boxes is popping up kestrel boxes and stuff, where you start watching the kestrels nesting inside of them. You're watching them fly around, and then you watch the juveniles fledge, and you sort of think, that was amazing, I want to do more. So you go from kestrels to then putting in pollinator banks, or you go from kestrels putting in nest boxes for other birds. Most agricultural land you can put in really easy things like sparrow boxes, starling boxes. They use the same sort of habitat, but they're perfect for like hedgehogs, mice, voles as well. So it's putting in little things like that. It's just, once you get that little hook, you tend to do more. So it's trying to encourage people of, it's a really easy way, we're giving you the box, just watch it. And we're quite lucky that most of the farmers we work with, their kids are obsessed with owls. So it's, we're already getting them into it.
Lastly, let's just go back to wildfowl and a new product that you have specifically designed with Wildlife World. The duck house, can you tell us a little bit about kind of what inspired you to make this?
Yeah, it's a bit of a 180 from house sparrows. But yeah, it's something that a lot of people don't think of. Most people these days are encouraging ponds in their gardens where they're not quite thinking about the benefits of what this water source could be. Things like mallards, they're not very picky at all. They'll nest anywhere. So even like bramble banks, if you're near any source of water, whether it's an estuary or a river or something, you could be a good location for them. So it's putting in these little wildfowl boxes and the duck boxes where the ducks have got somewhere to nest, and potentially the one that we're going to put up, we might put a camera inside of it so you can watch the process of. Ducks have got a bizarre way of nesting. It's not like with other birds, they nest every other day. So the way they do it, they'll build their nest, lay an egg, cover their nest, go away, do their business, come back, uncover the nest, lay another egg, cover the nest, go away until they reach the full clutch size, and then the female starts brooding. Which is why you see ducklings hatching every other day, because they're at different stages. We want to try and show people how amazing ducks are, because a lot of the time people are just, oh, it's a mallard. And it's, yeah, but they're really interesting. They do a lot of stuff. They're really simple. We give you all the kit you need. All you have to do is either put it up on the verge of a water source, or you can actually put it in the water themselves on a post, and then just watch the ducks, because they'll sit outside of it as well. So it's a nice way to get interested and get people interested into the type of different birds you can get in your gardens.
And a great one for kids, I suppose, because one of the first contacts with wildlife that you have as a child is to go and feed the ducks.
Yeah.
That's the most stereotypical thing that we all do, isn't it? And children adore it.
Yeah, especially when you see them running up to you and putting up this box and watching the female or the male sit outside of it, and then you start watching them inside, and it's not like with passerines like blue tits. Once they fledge, they'll just disappear. With ducks, when they fledge, you get to watch the ducklings, and then you can feed the ducklings. It's a nice way to get kids more involved in it, but also it's just nice in general that you see your little box has provided a whole lease of life to some little baby ducks, and then you see them around your garden, around your pond, and then you also see them just molting, and once they molt they fly off, and you sort of think, I did that.
Yeah.
I helped.
Yeah, how satisfying.
Yeah, that's what I find.
And we do talk a lot, and I know you've spoken in the past as well, about the mental health benefits of just looking, knowing about and caring for wildlife.
Yeah, it's a huge benefit. For me, it's sort of escapism, because my life is quite hectic in general. I mean, I work about 20 different jobs and run a business and everything. So it's quite nice sometimes where you just go for a walk, or it's quite therapeutic to just clean my feeders or check the nest boxes. One of the sites we have about 150 nest boxes, and when you check them all, you sort of think, no, I've done good. There's about 100 in use, where you sort of think, that was brilliant. Just putting up these boxes, I've given a home to all this nature, where even if your life's a bit stressful and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, it's nice to sort of think, no, I've done that. That's my little project.
That was birding expert, TV presenter and author Dan Rouse, whose book How to Attract Birds to Your Garden is available now from our website, where we even have a number of signed copies. You can find out more about this episode and past episodes of the Wildlife Community Podcast on the website. It's wildlifeworld.co.uk/blogs/podcast. Happy wildlife gardening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.